When Congress creates a crime like drug trafficking, makes that a criminal offense, they have to set a penalty, and typically they'll set a ceiling for that penalty. Oftentimes with crimes, especially serious crimes, in addition to setting a ceiling, they'll set a mandatory minimum so that the judge's discretion is limited.
And the reason people think that is problematic is prosecutors, through their charging decisions, can largely set the sentence for a particular defendant. And people on the pro-reform side would say judges should deem the sentence.
Now, more importantly, where the mandatory minimums that are currently being debated came from, and this is important, they really were passed in the mid-1980s, and the history behind them is that from 1961 to 1985, violent crime had tripled. Public was crying for a response, and Congress responded by enacting certain laws. From 1991 to 2014, violent crime was cut in half as we continued to put violent criminals and high-level drug traffickers in prison.
Most criminologists say that the biggest driver for the crime rate is the state of the economy. And the second thing is how policing has changed. In the 1990s, we put a lot more police on the ground solving crimes, and again, it's the certainty of getting caught and not the certainty of the punishment that tends to deter people from committing new crimes. And so there are all these factors that go into why the crime rate is high or low, but the link between that and incarceration rate is just not nearly as strong as we previously thought.
Now the problem is that as soon as we backed off these mandatory penalties and the enforcement approach that we had taken during those years, in 2015, 2016, violent crime drastically switched directions, and the violent crime rate went up 7% during those 2 years, and homicide rate went up 20%.
You look at a country like Canada, whose crime rates have largely mirrored ours. They've gone up, they've gone down, but Canada has locked up a fraction of the number of its citizens versus the United States. And so that has led many scholars to believe that it's not long sentences and the number of people we put in prison that drives the crime rate.
These mandatory minimums are critical to federal prosecutors in their ability to do their jobs. Mandatory minimums allow federal prosecutors to dismantle, disrupt interstate and international drug trafficking organizations, and they do it because when they have a mandatory penalty, it puts a criminal defendant in a position of either cooperating or facing substantial terms of imprisonment.
What ends up happening is people who are either innocent or have a triable case do not feel like they can exercise their constitutional right to a jury trial, because if you're offered a 3-year plea deal, but if you go to trial and there is a trial penalty of a 30-year mandatory minimum, who realistically, even if you're innocent, is going to risk those chances of potentially going away to prison for the bulk of your adult life? The United States has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. And we incarcerate our citizens at a greater rate than almost any other country on the planet. And mandatory minimums have been a part of that escalation of the use of incarceration.
The suggestion that we have an incarceration problem is misplaced. We have a crime problem, and I would encourage people who think that we have an incarceration problem to instead focus their efforts on front-end efforts to prevent crime and prevent criminals from engaging in these very serious crimes.